Next segment, where advisors and venture capitalists will explore the depths of investing in marketing. And I'd like to welcome up to the stage our moderator for this session, Ruchidana. And our panelists are Anvita Varshney, Arun Chulani, Bibin Babu, Chintan Sareen, and Pravash Day. If you'd all like to come up and take your seats, please.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ruchi Dana. I represent Dana Family Office. We invest into mainly medtech, deep tech, and mainly startups related to, they should have like some IP within them. So I'll try to leave the floor to the panelists. Hi, Martha, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Marta Payar. I invest in Middle East and Africa with my company, Kuvik Holding, and we mainly invest in lifestyle companies, including advertising, regtech, fintech, agritech, and renewable energies to the bottom of the pyramid. So our investment thesis is support companies and startups that help the people on the bottom of the pyramid in improving their life, but with a commercial return. And I'm really delighted to be here today.
Thank you, Martha. Hi, Chintan.
Hi, I'm Chintan Sareen. My core business is I'm into technology services. My company is called Exceed Labs LLC. We are based out of Dubai. And since last 1.5 years, I have been investing, and I have currently 7 companies in my portfolio. I invest across domains. So recently I have invested in a media company. I have investment in a food delivery company, last mile delivery, and then there's a trucking company that we invested in. So for me, portfolio is very, very important, and I love to have different kind of startups as part of my portfolio. So that's me.
Yeah, Pravash, can you speak about it?
Hi, I'm Pravas, founder of US India Blockchain Council. So basically, we incubate, we accelerate, as well as we do invest in sector agnostic startups particularly. And pretty much we work the government grants, channelizing the Startup India Fund, and also different state level startup policies and their funds, as well as we have just recently forming a global fund which is called as Global Innovation Fund. The idea is to invest around 30 companies. Also, we're looking to set up a media fund separately. So that would be very much focusing at art tech, media tech, as well as fintech companies.
Sure. So Martha, can you speak a little bit about the stage of companies that you look at? Like, would it be very early stage, or like companies with revenues? Like, what are the characteristics you look in a company?
Sure. So let me answer in 2 ways. First one, I will try to be a bit more theoretic and explain what are the different things that and stages that investor might look in. And then I can take it on Kuvik personally. So definitely one of the, I'd say, big thresholds is pre-revenue, post-revenue. Pre-revenue is before a company has generated any revenue. Maybe there is just a proof of concept. And post-revenue is when a company has generated even $10,000 or $20,000. So my company normally look at post-revenue, but we've recently invested in a pre-revenue company, and I will tell you later why. So definitely it's the first investment is pre-post. Secondly, it's about also scalability. If it's a specific, geographical product for a geographical area, or if it's worldwide scalable. For example, an app in English can be scalable across Africa, across New Zealand, US, versus a specific, dish that only Italians like. And the third criteria that I normally look at, it's team, the people. It's not just about the academic qualification and professional experience, but how the chemistry is among the co-founders, and of course the minimum viable product. So we, again, we definitely look into early stage companies, pre-series A, with post-revenue, with some revenue generations, and we just want good co-founders in terms of chemistry, in terms of experience. So we are not really looking for high-flyer universities. The reason why I said I did an exception is because I've invested in a company that is supporting video contracts. So it's supporting the failed economies, and we believe there is a huge potential. Even though before there was an MVP, 10 very big Fortune 500 companies asked us to pilot them, and we did basically the pilot before even having the MVP. So that's why.
So that's the pre-revenue company that you invested in. Excellent. So Pravash, can you speak a little bit about the stage of startups that you entertain in your incubator, and what kind of equity dilution advice would you give to the startups out here?
Sure. So basically, we take startups right from ideation stage or even sometimes pre-idea stage, because we work with a lot of college and university going students who just finishing their graduation. Instead of going for a job, they have an idea and they want to pursue that, or take their basically passion to the next level. So we have 2-3 different very much scaling points. So how we basically look at it, so we do design sprints where we normally take ideas and discuss it. Then after we do have hackathons, that's a 36-hour program, so where we actually, the idea guys, the marketing, the developers team, and the invest guy, they come together and they spend 36 hours to develop the prototype and take it to the next level. That is where we actually validate the idea and we see if it is a scalable idea, if the product is good, the team is good, then we invest. That is where the equity dilution sometimes between 3 to 5%, where actually there is an initial money is getting invested either from the government grants or also friends and family, but more in a very syndicate way so that they can raise the next level of investment quite quickly in 6 months to 1 year time, when they have some traction and they have already a private limited company, all these testimonials been done.
Sure. So Chintan, you've had some good success with some exits on your personal front as well. Can you speak a little bit about that, and then the kind of startups that you look now to invest in?
Yeah, so for me, the whole reason why I got into investing is because I got a good exit of, it's not an exit, but I got a chance to dilute some shares in the company, and I made a decent amount on that. So I'll come to that story. That's more how that investment and everything happened. More importantly for me, I always look to invest in businesses which are B2B rather than B2C. Because I know all of you are here from marketing background, and you would agree that today customer acquisition cost is going extremely high. And especially for ventures which are trying to do something disruptive, ventures which people have not experienced before, there definitely. And also a lot of companies which are trying to do what already exists but trying to do it in a better way through technology or whatever. So customer acquisition cost is something where mostly all the companies burn a lot of money, and that is something that I don't really like. So B2B always has that opportunity to grow, to scale up, and revenue generation is much faster in B2B. So for me, B2B is something that I always prefer. It's not a necessity, it's a preference. However, when we meet a lot of early stage startups, like one of the recent ones that we met was, and we invested also, we became part of that entire venture, it was at an ideation stage. So they wanted to basically put a technology to manage parking. Now, when they were trying to do that, they were trying to do on-demand parking kind of a solution, which really works in a market like Dubai, where parking is a very, very big problem, especially, and the kind of costs that are there, especially if you go to areas like DFC or more popular areas or more high-density areas. So we suggested them that if they can introduce a hotel model where the technology could help hotels or companies or places where people are already parking, it could help us, and they agreed. So flexibility among the startup owners is also very important, where we do not intend to actually change their idea, but help it evolve, which is very, very important, especially at an early stage startup, and especially if the person does not belong to a business background, because a lot of startups are people who do not belong to a business background. So that's our basically key idea of how we look forward to invest.
Sure. So Martha, have you had any bad investments till now? Would you like to share some story about that?
Yes, I did. I mean, I'm very transparent and honest. I think my first the first company we invested in, we had one person from Harvard, who graduated from Harvard, the other one from MIT, and then the third from Stanford. So raised a lot of money. Super idea was marketing B2B. And again, I understand very well B2B, so made a lot of sense. You will ask me what was the issue? Yeah. The issue, the co-founder, the chemistry. They couldn't, they were all prima donnas, they were all stars, and they weren't able to gel as a team. So they didn't manage to last, and they decided to dissolve the company and give back the money to the investors. So, on the paper, they will be the best of the best, and then the chemistry among the team wasn't working. And then the fact that two were married together also didn't happen. It didn't really help. So that was, I guess, my first mistake and my first investment. I mean, it was a mistake because we got the money back, but everything else so far went well. What I would say, especially when you invest in Africa, so an emerging market, it takes longer than you expect, so you need really to plan and to be risk-oriented, because you know that one day you're up and your company, it's valuated a lot, the other day you might lose it. So I guess it's really about not being, not wanted to high valuation, to high returns too quickly, but just plan to have patient capital.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a very important point. Like the team members should gel together. They should be coachable, because in a startup it's all about pivoting. Like you never come up with the best idea. You'll have to change yourself according to the market and according to the customer's feedback. So Chintan, have you made any bad investments till now?
I have made a lot of bad investments, definitely. But they were prior to me having money. I would look at an opportunity, because that's how the mindset was. I think it's 2.5, 3 years ago, when you would every day read a blog or read a newspaper and it would say X startup got this million funded, this startup got this million funded. So I got excited. I said, so I borrowed some money from friends, and then I invested in a company. I mean, I was pretty naive, and my whole idea was, because that's how the pitch came to me. It was like, bro, we have this idea, you put 50 lakhs, and in 3 months we'll have 20 million valuation. If you do your math, you'll make at least 5 million. I was like, wow, man, that's very good. So yeah, that happened. And definitely that was a mistake. However, it gave me a good lesson that like she was mentioning, there is a pre-value and post-value analysis that you do for the product. For me, it's very, very important that now it has become very important that there should be product, or the idea has to be at some level. And definitely that startup also failed, because one of the guys actually took that money that I invested and one of my friends invested and ran away. So that's also the thing. So yeah, definitely. I mean, everything has a good and bad to it.
And any particular investments that you missed out on, like you regret that you didn't invest into them?
So every day there are a lot of people that we meet. In this event, we have met a lot of people from the events that are happening here on both the sides of this conference room, and in fact here. There are a lot of opportunities which we feel that are very good and we should become part of. However, there is no regret, but there is also a feeling that, you know, if things were in a better shape for that startup or for us, there could have been alignment. Because today I feel that we are living in a great world where if you talk about 10 years ago, if you're not a doctor or an engineer, you could not make money. So when I used to be an animation trainer, I used to teach. And the kind of salary that I would get, even my friends who were CAs and lawyers and doctors would not get. That was a very tough situation then. At this point of time, you can make business out of anything. So if you know about Dubai, there is a startup which, it's not a startup, it's a business, it's called Phillies. So he only makes tea. He added some saffron to the tea, and now he's a big name here. He has got branches across. Imagine somebody selling tea doing that. Or in India, there are so many fantastic stories of people making business out of anything. If you remember when demonetization happened, one of the most talked about startups was My Chotu or something. So you could go to the app, get a guy, and he will be in the line and get money for you. So you can make money out of anything and everything that's happening. So yeah, opportunity is always there. Sometimes you have to lose it for certain reasons.
That's excellent. And if you guys didn't check out, you should check out Phillies Tea. There's a huge waiting line in almost all of the places for Phillies to get a single cup of tea from them. So Pravash, did you make any mistakes in startups, or do you regret any investments that you missed out on, or made bad investments?
I did actually 3 bad investments in myself. One of the bad investment is actually doing my MBA. That costed a lot of money, you know, almost like 6 years my saving. And I did MBA. I realized that I should not have done that and put that money back in my business. I would have been in very different place. But at the same time, I learned a lot, and that gave me opportunity to meet really world-class entrepreneurs. And they shown trust because they understood the story, where I came from, whatever my family backgrounds, and I'm the first generation entrepreneur trying to do a difference. And that's basically, the milestone that I have achieved. Always I go back and talk to my startups that, don't go to investors when you are in ideation stage or just having a prototype. Create some traction, at least do 2-3 rounds or editions, whatever you are doing, and then after go to the investor and show them the story. The most important thing is your customer. If your customers are happy, they are ready to give you the first-hand testimonial, then take that piece and go to the investors. So that is what the investors believe in. Second thing is obviously work on your maths. Very clearly the financial focusing, and also the P&L. And I'm very much like, doesn't matter which background the startups comes from, what sector they are working on. If they don't count their day in, day out, how much money they are spending and how much money they are making every day. Sometimes I need your next 3 to 5 years financial forecasting. I need every day, month by month, day by day, how much. And they were like, you are one of the rigid incubator we normally go to who asks all these things, because other incubation managers or their directors don't ask that. So it's like you take investors' money. It's a responsibility. So if today you lost, obviously you can always go back and say to the investor, please write off. But what happens what's the next move? Even no company is going to hire sometime because of these bad mistakes. And that is where I feel entrepreneurship is a lifestyle. So once somebody gets into it, they have to live with it. So they have to be very serious when they want to start a business. And once they start a business, they have to be very serious with that money, or the people they are hiring, and also the product they're focusing on.
That's excellent advice that Pravash gave for the startups out here. Martha, do you have some advice for startups, startup founders when they reach out to investors? What are the key things they should have in mind to not waste too much of the time of investors? Just stay to the point.
Well, I would say something pretty weird, but I will say, since I've been also hustling on the other side before, and I set up my first business when I was 16, don't take no for an answer. I mean, if, there are very different focuses, so an investor is not investing in everything. An investor, even if it just do pre-revenue, might be interested in a specific sector, might be interested in a specific geographical area, might be interested, I don't know, in supporting women founders. So let's try to make sure that you segment exactly, the kind of investor you want. There are some investors that are commercial, like VCs. There are others that are non-commercials, like, for example, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, USAID. So my suggestion is do your homework, try to understand exactly which kind of investors do you need, and it's going to be, giving you the best positive answer. And like you do with marketing, target your audience. And then secondly, don't take no for an answer. I mean, you don't become an entrepreneur unless you come from a very wealthy family. If, you get frustrated and, you don't persist. It has to be stronger than yourself. If not, go back to corporate or go back to employment. So it's never been easy for anybody. And those are the obstacles you need to overcome.
Interesting. There's actually a graph which shows like the life cycle of a startup. So in this very beginning, there's a lot of like excitement, hype, and all of that, and then there's a deep trough of sorrow, because that's when you get the rejections and you see no's, and you cannot take no for an answer because it's your baby, that it's your own startup that you're starting. Like, even your friends and family might say like, oh, just go back, do your job and this and that, but like it takes a lot of guts to stand by and pursue your dreams, right?
I would
Excellent.
like to add to that.
Yeah, Chintan, so...
I would just like to add to that. What she said is very right. As a founder, you need to have patience. That's very, very important. That's the key feature. And secondly, like I said yesterday also, in the end, startup is a business. So a startup founder should always look at making revenue through sales and not just run behind raising money. So a startup, you don't do a startup to raise money. First of all, that's very, very important. And that has to be very clear in your mind. There have been a lot of startups so what is a startup? Startup is basically a small team coming up with an idea and doing it and implementing it and going to the market is the startup. Whereas people think startup is where you just raise money, you make money and you go out and enjoy your life and then become an investor and then start investing in other projects. That's not how it is. It has to become a sustainable business. So revenue is something that every startup founder should look at. And secondly, very, very importantly, there is one concept where I have met a lot of startup founders, and they have this thing which a lot of people also communicate to them is, don't dilute too much equity. So I want to understand what is too much equity. What do you mean by too much equity? What is too much equity? You can't define too much equity, because what you are diluting should be proportionate to the kind of benefit you are getting out of that deal. That should be the priority. So I'll just give you one example. So one of the companies that we invested, and somebody co-invested with us, we gave him a very good deal, and the founders were left with just 32% in the first round, in the seed round. However, today that startup in last 6 months, from making a revenue of 6 lakhs a month, is making a revenue of 48 lakh rupees a month, and are now in 3 countries. So there is also, when you look at an investment opportunity, you also have to look at whether that person is bringing in only the money, or is there a value addition that can be brought into that entire deal. And I think wherever there is additional value addition that happens in the deal, you will always succeed as a winner, because there is no limit to how much money you can put in. And very, very importantly, to the founders, you have to understand, doing media, doing PR, there has to be a limit to that. A big chunk of the money that you have should be invested in your product, in your team, and especially to ensure that yesterday, I think one of the things that I really would connect to was the CX part, the CX presentation. I think all of you agreed to it, and there was a lot of communication on that. So invest on that, because today, one, customer acquisition cost is very high, and secondly, I personally feel with digital coming into place, the brand loyalty has gone down. So it's my version. I'm not saying it should be everybody's version. This is my take on it. So for example, I have a restaurant in India. It's my father's business in partnership with somebody. It's in Gurgaon. Anybody from Gurgaon here? Yeah, so I think you would know about a place called Night Rider, which is DLF Phase 2. So, we are not on Zomato, we are not on Swiggy, because I have this feeling that once you go on Swiggy and Zomato, as a consumer, when I go to Swiggy and Zomato, I might want to eat from somebody, but as soon as I see 50% off, 25% off, my priorities change and I just go and click and try to get the best deal that I'm getting. And that happens with e-commerce as well. So customer acquisition is one part of it, but customer retention is your biggest gameplay. And especially the kind of businesses that we look into B2B, customer retention is everything, because there is a recurring money that you are making out of that customer. Never lose that.
Excellent. So, with the world economy going down and what happened with WeWork and Uber, do you think like startups would get less money from investors? What's your opinion, Pravesh?
I don't think so. It's an opportunity for investors as well as startups. I think in a very different way, because when a startup approaches to any investor, whosoever it is, it's a marriage, right? And if they do understand to each other, if the investor believes in that product and the team, and also how the startups can scale up and how much return they can get with the timeline, with whether it's a 7 years or 7+2 or 9+2 years exit. So very clear, defined roadmap and milestones. Once that is being done through the due diligence and all these things comes afterwards. So second is opportunity. I believe, as the world economy is like moving towards a global economy, so no matter where the founder is or even the investor, now they can reach out just simply by a reference click, in LinkedIn or talk about Angelco. So I got almost like 3 of my investments right from the reference itself. So I have a very good relationship with my mentor. He knows Richard Branson, and that's how I got my first funding. So which excited me, and then after suddenly I decided I want to come back to India, do great stuff. And then when I didn't realize the market, I was very much fascinated by the whole branding of India was happening abroad. And I came, and then I realized, I did a mistake, but I took this challenge and I decided not to go back to UK, stay in India, deal with the situation and build the product. So now I got my next investment. So that is where the consistency comes in, and I think the world is open for everyone.
I think what happened with WeWork or the current global scenario is good for Indians, is my take on it. Because we as Indians were always focused at hard work. I think all of you would agree that from the right childhood days, we have heard how our grandfather has been hardworking and our fathers have been working, and then we were supposed to be hardworking. But with this whole concept of startup and ease to get fund, people started cutting corners. So I think to an extent that should come into perspective. I know I spoke about this to a friend of mine, but he was like, that's bullshit. The guy made 1 billion. Like, that's not the only story to be learned out of this. There is a second side to it. And so that's going to be good for that. And secondly, a lot of these big investment companies, I'm not against them. They're very important for growth. But I think this would make things in a better way, from a perspective that now less cash burning will happen and money will be utilized for betterment of the overall growth of the company.
Yeah, we've seen some corrections being done in the valuations as well. Yeah. So Martha, do you find this interesting? Are the valuations of startups going down with the current economic situation?
To be honest with you, we invest a lot in Middle East and in Africa, and we see Saudi growing, and we see the valuation of companies in Saudi and in East Africa growing, because it's a bit of a hype. What I would say is that every startup that brings value to a customer and that solves a real problem is gonna keep his value. I mean, we don't look at maybe what's gonna happen the next 3 to 6 months. I'm more of a patient investor, so there will be definitely some adjustment. We are not looking at this. We are looking at delivering value to our customers as my fellow panelists were saying, and to have a healthy organic growth made by revenue, by healthy customer, by customer who are recurrent ones, so continue to buy. We are also not really invested in in companies who will need a lot of capital, and we've never also invested in real estate. So we work whenever you satisfy a need of 3 billion of people, or you potentially satisfy a need of 3 billion people, which is about electricity, which is about water, which is about financial inclusion. How do I pay? Those are, and you do it well, and you solve a real problem. Those are companies that will always be there. The need will always be there. We will always need electricity, water, food. By the way, we're also about to invest in a food company, in a food app. Those are the basic needs of my mother, your mother, of Richard Branson, of everybody. So that's my view.
Those are the fundamental rules of investing. So, Pravash, would you like to talk about any particular startup that you really liked out of your portfolio? Or you can even talk about any of the blockchain startups that you'd like to share some knowledge on.
Yeah, so basically, when we do incubate or even invest, we look at the scalability, and the product is the first stance. And the second is obviously invest the founders team and their extension team as well. But what I feel is the ecosystem has to play a major role. If you talk about Silicon Valley or Silicon Roundabout, it's like last 15, 20, 25 years experience and the maturity level of investors as well as startups they have. A lot of deals even happens at bars there. So that I have experienced and seen in my eyes. But when you talk about Asian countries, particularly I can take the example of India. So there is a lot of misunderstanding of how the private equity investments happens. And I've been to my friends and their dad who are very much traditional businesses, and they ask like, okay, we want to put 1 million once a year, but we want 80% of your company. I'm like, okay, I'm the founder, I'm the poor guy, I have idea, I have made this much, but I also have some passion, so I would like to equally distribute. So if I'm putting the hard work and doing all these things and you're putting the money, let's shake hands on the basis of equal partnership. And I'm also looking to the next round of return on investment for me as a founder as well. And that is where I think the ecosystem plays a major role, where both the government, policymakers, investors, as well as other industry people, and that is not so much matured. And many of the time, when you see startups who are raising money or investors even who are putting money, so it's a very much individualistic deal happen. And I think everybody should work towards that. Once we have a matured ecosystem, there would be a lot of players who can come in, investing money. And I believe this is a very democratic process. To be very honest, when I had an experience that people have raised almost, even through blockchain, there was a time when people are investing crazy. It has gone to $18,000, $20,000, and people are raised. I have seen like my friends who raised in Australia around $40 million US just by doing an ICO. And they were like, are you crazy enough sitting in India when you have like 7 years of trading experience in Bitcoin? I'm like, okay, I've done this mistakes coming back to India, but have you thought of the 1.3 billion market we have? And that is where the consumer have the decision-making power they can turn around. Even I said one product with 1 rupees, then it's 1.3 billion population. If they buy 1 rupees, then I have that much of capacity, which probably no other country has. So those are the things have to be taken decisions while making decisions, having a startup or investing any kind of startups. So yeah, and the second thing is regulation as well. Most of the time, the government don't think about it when there is any new technology or emerging technology. The moment it's bad mouth starts or negative thing starts in the market, that is where the government responds. And say, for example, right now, the whole part of the blockchain ecosystem in India, every crypto founders, they are like chasing the government, please bring in the policy change policy. Now, I would say the government has to look through what is happening, and they definitely have to take steps beforehand. They should bring either policy level change or open the market so that players or innovation can happen. Because if you don't give that openness at the ecosystem, the innovation is never going to happen. So that's very much important that everybody should actually, whatever they're investing or taking money, they should also look at the ecosystem at a whole.
Sure. Chintan, would you like to share a good portfolio company out of your investments?
So, for me, every company is a good company. However, I have made an investment in a media company recently. That's Pravash's company, actually. And I feel that it has got very good potential. Media is something that I have always been interested in. Just to tell you, before technology, I had a digital media agency. And I got opportunity to work with brands like shopping.indiatimes.com and Snapdeal and all these. As an agency, we were working with them, creating content, doing digital marketing and all of that stuff. So media is something that's very important, I'm very keen on. And the reason why I think this media investment is going to be very good is because I feel that media is the most powerful tool to manipulate the mass. But in the right way, not in the wrong way. Of course, it is being done in a wrong way. However, it can be done in a right way. And if you get right kind of content to people, and if you are able to communicate what is right and wrong, not being biased, I think that is something that is extremely, extremely useful. And from a revenue perspective, the kind of revenues that you can make with media is enormous. And especially with now so many channels of distribution, content distribution happening, that's always an opportunity. Secondly, very, very importantly, media is something that can be easily scaled now. So we are not a media, we are not a news channel, we are a media agency or a media house which will have its own TV channel. So maybe we are launching in India in March, we are launching our own channel. However, now it's very easy. So if I want to go to Dubai, let's say, or maybe if I want to go to an African country, the only thing I need to do is I need to have a relevant content, and then a YouTube channel would do an initiation for me. So step to do that is very, very fast. So yeah, that's why I'm pretty hopeful that it's going to work out for us.
Sure. Now I think we have a little bit time left, so we'll open up the round for the audience. If you have any questions for our panelists.
Hi, my name is Saurav. Thank you for the wonderful conversation. The question that I particularly had for VCs, that we all know running companies that equity is the most dearest form of capital. And there was a conversation that was happening that what is the right amount of equity. Now, if you can tell us a bit more about what should the startup keep in mind so that it doesn't land up in the wrong VC's hand. That will be very interesting to know.
So there are both sides to it. As an investor, how it should happen, and from a founder, how it should happen. I think one of the good strategies that I always follow now is I spend time with those guys. And same thing the founder should do is spend time with the VC. Because, like I said, money is the biggest deal breaker. I think all of you would agree that most of the relationships suffer because of money. And you are getting into an association with an unknown person who is investing money, who is always going to be very, very shrewd about it. So a good thing is, which is not a bad thing, being shrewd, being business-minded is not a bad thing, but you need to spend a lot of time together to understand whether your frequencies match or not. That's one key feature. And if you say how do, maybe second part of the question was how do you find the right value and how do you ensure that that's the right association? See, initially once you have that common vision together on that thing, you have to leave it on time. And what you have to do as a founder and as a VC is stick to your commitments. Once that starts to happen, that's the only way to succeed. Otherwise, there is no surety, there is no fixed way. I don't know a fixed way of how I can ensure that this investment is going to be right, or as a founder, I would know if this investor is right for me. It's all about that time, moment, and your understanding of how things are between you two.
Thank you.
I might also add and say, look at the term sheet. Just make sure that if you're an early stage company, of course, the investor will ask for more equity compared to, having more customers and more solidity. So just make sure that whatever your term sheet is, get a good lawyer, invest in it, because, every VC knows very well the term sheet for you is a new thing. So my suggestion is also make sure you have a good lawyer. Make sure if they ask you too much of equity, then have a conversation. And as my colleague said, do your research well.
Hi, this is Siddharth here. So I'm into sports industry, sports technology, sports marketing, and I'm also on the board of Qatar Sports Tech, which is one of the first sports tech accelerator that we have focusing on 2022. And I've been an investor. I have had bad experiences myself and a good exit myself. So my question to you is, with the current, Ruchi spoke about the Uber and WeWork kind of thing. How much of FOMO kills a VC? Like fear of missing out, that somebody has done it, my friend has done this, and now like, say Sequoia has done this, then now Nexus has to do it, or somebody else do it. So how much of those things playing on your mind when you're sitting on the big fund house? Or at the same time, small side, you're looking at, we always had, there are a lot of copies happening everywhere. It has to be smart as well. It cannot be like, Flipkart is a smart copy of Amazon. And it's a story in itself. So when you're looking at that at the early stage, what are the things that you're looking at when you're looking at a copy?
Okay. So basically what he's asking is there a phobia if things go wrong in the market? Is there a phobia between the investors, among the investors? And how do you decide if you are doing a copy that's a smart copy, the product that you are opting for or planning to invest, if it's copied from somewhere, how do you know that?
No, so sorry, actually it's not a phobia, I'm talking about the fear of missing out. It's a...
The fear of missing out.
So I'll try to answer that. So, most of the VCs in the Valley, they have an anti-portfolio page on their website, which shows, oh, we missed out on Google, we missed out on Facebook, like the Google guys had come up to us, but we missed out because of this reason. So that's actually giving a lot of FOMO to various other players. But the best part about the Valley is that they have certain focus areas and they won't go beyond it. So like if somebody is looking at health tech or med tech, he would only focus on that. And he would be really expert at that domain, right? So that's why like these kind of mistakes don't like they can happen, but like don't happen very well in the Valley. So that's why I think one of the main reasons that FOMO doesn't affect most of the VCs is that they have particular focus areas and they'll stick to that. If you bring a crypto deal to a medtech investors, he won't invest into it, even though like crypto, e-cigarettes, cannabis, anything like these are really good money-making deals, but there are certain people who would never look at them because they don't understand it and they have their other focus areas, right? So I think that's one way to mitigate the risk. About the Me Too products, I think like India is coming up with innovative models. It's not Me Too anymore. Me Too used to happen back in the ages, but these days I think most of the startups that are coming out of India and China are service oriented, because the cost of service, like to get a blood sample done in India, you can actually have the nurse or somebody come to your home and get the blood sample. That would never happen in the US, right? So these are innovative models that are coming up in India and these countries, because like there are certain factors that are cheap and it all depends on the economy.
Yeah, so just starting on to what she said, so the reason why I could become an investor and get a good exit was because of a startup called Ghibli, which is a Dubai-based startup, and I think February 2018 was when I became part of the shareholding and all of that. And right now I have made extremely good amount of money with that, with my basic share dilution. What it was basically a delivery company, and when we launched, there was already Deliveroo here, there was Talabat, there was QuickUp, there was Zomato was doing food delivery. Why did we succeed? We were just a copy. Why could we succeed was because while you are copying an idea, the whole differentiation comes with your business plan. I think that's a very, very key factor to be differentiated. So that's something that now, with my good experience with this, I'm able to, I see and I look at whether it's the same idea, but how is it being executed? So for example, Tinder, for example, is the benchmark of it. But when Bumble came in, they manipulated the idea, they added an additional feature to it. So everything, all these factors, there are a lot of micro factors that you need to look at before deciding whether that this is a good copy or a bad copy. However, there is always good and bad both to actually entering a market which already exists and with a kind of product that you are taking in the market if it already exists, because you have a basic sense of what's right and wrong to take it. Again, these small things, maybe a good marketing strategy, maybe a good content strategy, or maybe a good business plan will help you differentiate and grow.
So this question is just out of curiosity. Here, I'm at the last actually. Yeah. So I think how often you guys meet your founders in order to really see whether the things are working. So this is just a curious question, I would say. And the second thing is how you manage the portfolio. So how you distribute your funds. Is it department-wise, or how you plan it actually?
For us, like we have invested in startup companies in the US as well. So I sit on a board of few, so I keep traveling to the US. That's one of the ways I meet the founders. But it's really not necessary to have like face-to-face meetings if you're investing worldwide, right? But Zoom calls and all that happen like every month. That's actually a rule. We have like the first Monday of a month we have a Zoom call with all the founders, and that's almost like a rule that's being followed all through a company.
So for me, I'm an individual who is managing all the 7 companies. For me, I think mails and presentations don't work at all. I usually do an alternate day or every third day Skype call with the founders, especially when the initiation and the investment is very new. A big reason for that is that we need to get in sync. See, the thing is that, so for example, a company that I may have invested in India, and my intention is to bring it to UAE. So we need to get into sync for everything. So I usually prefer talking to the founders a lot. And in terms of management, my strategy is, usually there are 2 founders to every startup. That's a minimum thing on an average. Whatever is missing. So for example, in one of the startups, there was no finance guy. So what I did was I gave a small amount of my equity to a finance guy that I have been working with for a long time and get him on board. So that way, whatever is it that you are lacking in the business, I'm able to accommodate to that. And then everything just gets into a cycle through reporting and everything. So it's usually a fortnight or a 30-day report, depending on how long the business has been running and working.
Well, for me, I have to admit, everybody has different ways. I've grown in my way. So the first year, I was actually leaving, staying every 2-3 days physically in the company I invested. That was a early stage startup. So I was there physically. We had once every 2 months strategy meetings, like for 2 days, to define everything. And again, it was in an African country where we really needed to be there and on top. And as he was saying, bring, let's say, finance, bring technology, bring marketing, talent, and share knowledge. And then I grow. The more I invested and the companies developed, the more I basically became a reading freak. So basically, I like to review numbers. I like to review, reports. So we have like a monthly investor newsletter from all the different companies. And I read this. And then, of course, once every 2 months, we now do calls. Again, I'm very good with emails, so that's why it's, I guess, very, very different from person to person and management style from management style. I like to read Excel. I want to see the, the projections, the processes, because that's also my background. And that's how I now do it, after several years.
So that's a good mix of panelists that you had. I think there was one last question there, yeah.
It'll have to be a really quick one, please, because we are way out of time.
Thank you so much. It was really interesting to understand like what VCs are thinking about at the time of investing in the brands and companies. Now, this fraternity where we are sitting right now is basically into marketing and advertising and majorly digital media agencies. So maybe this question I'm asking it to myself that if I'm a new company and I'm into digital advertising, my entire costing is about the people, the creative ideas, hardwares and softwares and technology, which I will definitely have to invest for the first or the 2 years and would have to wait for the business to come in. And definitely it is the time of 12 to 15 months for a new VC to, new company to evolve itself and at least bring something on the table to go ahead and talk to VCs. However, my question here is, let's say we are a company based out of India and we want to enter the Dubai market and we do not need any help on digital advertising or any kind of tech. But what we are doing is we want to establish outdoor OOH, a digital standee and kiosk kind of thing with programmatic ads, which can capture audience attention when they are looking at the kiosk in the shopping malls, airports, and other places. If this company has to launch in Dubai, it definitely requires a lot of communication through the government, the approvals for outdoor digital displays. We need to understand the market, how to go about it. We want to understand that what kind of help, as a VC panel, do you think you can do for a new company to come to Dubai and start working out here in Middle East?
So Dubai, I moved to Dubai this January only, but I've had a very good experience with the government sector, especially different parts of government sector. A good thing about a place like Dubai is that everything is very, very transparent. There are set rules and regulations that you need to follow and go in. However, the thing is, the kind of product that you're talking about, I'm sure if you go to Dubai Mall, the first thing that the GM or the marketing guy will tell you is, I get hundreds of these every day. So, again, it is very, very tricky how you would come here. Regulations and everything can be managed. However, it is all about the implementation where it has to be implemented. And that's where relationships come into play. So that is one product that I'm doing now. I'm actually talking to Dubai Mall for a product which is not anything to do with marketing. It's more of a customer experience product. These products come from India. We have spoken to them. So the first thing we do is we do a basic due diligence. If things work, then you have to do free demos is what we can arrange up to. Post that, everything is up to you. So our relationships will only help you to get your foot in the door, get a meeting and get time to present your idea. That's all that a VC could do.
And another question here is, like in India, when we are doing...
Guys, I'm really, really sorry. We are so far out of time. We're going to have to leave this.
We can take it
Later. Yeah, please.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. Thank you very much to Marta and also Ruchi and Chintan and Pravash. That was a great discussion. Thank you so much.